Good morning. The time is 9:04, and we will call this meeting of the Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Board to order. Today is Friday, February 23rd, 2024. We welcome everyone. Mr. McAnally will lead us in the pledges.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
We will now have roll call.
Chair Sarah Oates.
Present.
Martha Gallery Lynch.
Present.
Chance Bolton.
Present.
Mark McEnroe.
Present.
Yolanda Castro.
Present.
Lisa Sprinkle.
Present.
Paola Escalante-Castillo.
Present.
Betsy Robinson.
Present.
And John Michael.
Present.
We have everyone in attendance today. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I would like to note that if you wish to speak on any item, whether it be an agenda item or any public comment that's not on the agenda item, you must complete a public meetings comment slip, which are right outside the door at the table. Also, if you are here to get continuing ed hours, you also need to sign up at the table outside of the meeting room, and the credits are only awarded in 2-hour increments, so if we don't go to 2 hours today, then I apologize. We have a light agenda. I would like to note that we're going to move agenda item number 14, executive session, after agenda item number 15 for consideration of anyone that's here to speak in the public discussion. I have asked Ms. Sprinkle to open the meeting with our mission moment.
Thank you. When Chairman Oates asked me to give the mission statement this time, I thought, what in the world can I talk about? The first thing that came to my mind was balance. Now that kind of shows you how my mind works. People talk about balance all the time. Balance in their personal lives, balance in their work lives. Older people like me talk about our lack of balance. But that brings me to my thoughts. Serving on this board, I get to watch attempts to balance, bringing things into balance, balancing with various personalities. I have witnessed this board balance the needs of the appraiser industry. I have seen how our wonderful staff has balanced the workload to benefit the profession in so many ways. I have seen the attempt to keep a balance for those that wish to enter the field. I have also seen how this board and the entire commission has worked to balance the needs of the public, the needs of society. When a governmental entity can balance the benefits between an industry, a profession, and the public, then I think we have really accomplished something to be proud of. I thank you for the opportunity to see real balance in action.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sprinkle. I appreciate that opening.
Well said.
Well said. This takes us to agenda item number 4. At our November meeting, Mr. Bolton nominated Ms. Reed Lynch for vice chair and Mr. McAnally for secretary. We can consider nominations from the floor today, so I will open the discussion for any additional comments. If there are none, I will hear a motion.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Bolton.
I move that we elect the vice chair and secretary as nominated.
A second.
We have a motion by Mr. Bolton and a second by Ms. Robinson. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. takes us to agenda item number 5, committee appointments. After consultation with my fellow board members, the committees will remain the same as they were previously. The Budget and Finance Committee will be Ms. Escalante Castillo, Mr. McAnally, and Ms. Robinson serving as chair. Education and Licensing Committee will be comprised of Mrs. Sprinkle, Ms. Robinson, and Mr. Castro continuing to serve as chair. Enforcement Committee will be Mr. Eichelberger, Mr. Castro, and Mr. Bolton continuing to serve as chair. And for now, I will continue to serve as our representative on the TREC and TALC Joint Audit Committee. I want to thank everyone for the work that is put in at the committee level. It's been fairly light recently, but that's not always how it is. So be prepared for some work between now and our November workshop. But I appreciate everyone committing to taking extra time to be on these committees. As a reminder to the public, the committee meeting dates are posted on the website, and along with the agendas and any materials, and they're all done by video conference. So you can log on, you can listen, you can participate when there's opportunity for public discussion. But you just have to, I believe there's an option on there to get notifications on our website. So when something's posted, you can see. But they're about quarterly. They usually take place about a month and a half before our board meetings. And we invite everyone to participate in those committee meetings. The next agenda item is an opportunity for anyone to comment, to make a public comment on anything that's not on the agenda today. I don't believe we've received any requests to speak. Agenda item number 7 is the ratification of the official record of the November 9th and November 10th board meetings as approved for posting on the website by the Secretary of Board. These can be found on page 7 of your materials. Does anyone note any changes? If not, I will hear a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that the board ratify the minutes of the November 9th, 2023 and November 10th, 2023 board meetings.
I second.
We have a motion by Ms. Reed Lynch and a second by Mr. Castro. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. We have 2 enforcement matters today before us, the final orders and surrenders in the matter of A and B. 2 complaints. These are on page 14 in your materials. We did not receive any requests for public comment on any of these matters, and as a reminder, the board doesn't have any, there's no action required by the board.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Bolton.
I'd like to ask just one question for clarification. On the complaint 230107 and 230121, I guess there's 2 properties that they are involved in this. The first one, it's a little unclear to me who the complainant is or what type of complainant it is. I think it may be a property owner, but I'm not quite sure. I was just curious. And this is on what is called the Aransas properties. It said that they alleged a violation of the ethics complaint by asking complainant for photographs of the subject.
On that one, to kind of clarify, this final order was signed back in November. It's back in the materials again because there was an extension.
Right.
I mean, as far as, I might actually turn this over to Melissa to address and give her some time to walk up here.
Yeah, no.
But
I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot. I'm just curious because it just wasn't clear. In the other portion of it, it says that it was based on a Fannie Mae Loan Quality Center state tip. And I'm just trying to keep abreast of
page 19, I think.
who's making these complaints. Yeah, that was on page 19.
I appreciate you asking that question and kind of looking into this, because we want to make sure that there's as much transparency as possible on these. So thank you for catching that, Mr. Bolton.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so just give me a minute, I'm pulling it up here. We have complaints 0121 and complaints 0107. Complaint 0121 was filed by Fannie Mae.
Madam Chair,
Mr. McAnally?
may I interject? This was the same one I had a question about, and one of the investigators visited with me on this. And I think it is just the wording of the paragraph there. And my understanding from Jeff Strohmeyer was that actually the person that filed the complaint asked the appraiser for the photographs. When I read it, I thought that the appraiser was asking for the photographs, and that's when I went, okay, was this a drive-by, or was this a virtual appraisal, or something like that? And it was just, he admitted that the wording was a little confusing.
Yeah, and again, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just curious if this was done by, a
Well,
property owner or by a lender, AMC. Where did it come from?
Yeah.
I am looking into the second complaint, but before I tell you something that's not correct, can I look into it?
And it doesn't have to be today. If you just,
Okay.
if you look into it and just let me know, that would be
Yes.
great.
Okay, I got it.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you.
So I will note that both of these enforcement actions are the result of Fannie Mae tips. I believe the second one is sort of a different kind of tip that Fannie Mae normally does. So I just kind of wanted to bring that to your attention, as we continue to talk about the workload from these Fannie Mae tips and how many there have been, and the staff resources that are directed towards them. The second one, if you'll see on page 26, it was Fannie Mae noticed through their, algorithms or whatever, that an appraiser was appraising properties across 4 jurisdictions in a single day. Sometimes I think it was 7 or 8 in one day across Texas, Maryland, Washington, Virginia. So obviously that's something that, when we talk about Fannie Mae complaints, this is sort of in a different category than some of the other ones, that talk about adjustments or the appropriateness of comps and that sort of thing. So I did want to point that out to the board.
Madam Chair, so when we get, and that part is totally understandable when they bring algorithms into the play to identify issues, but when there are tips calling in and then Fannie Mae sends the complaint to us, are those individuals being documented?
So I think that there's, and probably because the first action was a Fannie Mae tip, which is, am I saying this wrong, Melissa? I don't want to be saying the wrong thing. Do they come to us the same way? Did both of these tips come to us sort of in the same format? Because we usually don't put on there that the complainant was Fannie Mae. We usually say staff initiated. So is that because it was a different level of complaint?
Actually, the second complaint in this matter was filed by the consumer, so the homeowner. But typically, Fannie Mae complaints come in as referrals, so those of you have...
I'm talking about second. The first respondent has 2, and then the second respondent has 1, so I think we're talking past each other. So you're saying the first respondent had 2 different complaints, and one was the homeowner and one was Fannie Mae?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
And so on that one, do we put on the complaint, it's hard for me to scroll through these documents, that it was a Fannie Mae tip? Or,
Yeah, we do.
Okay, we do.
Yep.
Okay, so they both, from the public's perspective, they would both look the same?
From the public's perspective, so in the second one, in the second complaint matter on here, they submit those as actual complaints.
Okay, that's what I thought, as opposed to a tip.
As opposed to a tip. So we distinguish them, we say state tips for the ones that are the state tips that they email, and then the ones that are actual complaints, we call them complaints.
Okay, so does that make sense to everybody? It's sort of a different level. So when we talk about how to handle Fannie Mae complaints, we're talking about the tips, not necessarily these that are rise to a higher level. Have I confused anyone? Have I confused everyone? Does anybody else have any questions on these two enforcement matters? If not, we will move on to committee reports. We only had one committee meeting this go-round. Again, it was very quiet. The executive committee report is included in your materials on page 35. All that I'll note from that meeting is that we did approve voluntary reviewers. If you'll recall, we shifted that to the committee level to make it a little easier for us to dig into. It's a little bit kind of like a personnel item, not quite the same, but so we wanted to have the opportunity to dig into those a little more, and we did approve the voluntary reviewers, and we certainly appreciate all those that submitted applications and agreed to provide this service for us. It's invaluable, so we thank you. This takes us to staff reports. They start on page 38 with the summary. Executive Director Buckholz.
Is that hard to say?
It just doesn't roll off the tongue like it
It's
used
a little bit different, isn't it? Well, good morning. It's good to see all of you. I know it's been a little while since I've been with you and since a few of you have been here, so it's good to all be together. I wanted to welcome our ASC staff members to our meeting. They are watching virtually. This is one of the first pieces to our ASC compliance review, which will bring the ASC to Austin in April. This is just their regular 2-year compliance review for us. So we'll keep you posted on that as it progresses. I also want to point you to, as Chair Oates mentioned, to page 38 in our materials for the executive summary of the staff reports. I'm not going to highlight anything specific there simply because they are here to answer any questions you have, and the summary really just reflects this general sense that we are humming along efficiently and effectively on all fronts. But let us know if you have any questions on any of that reporting. I also wanted to mention that we have a new staff attorney, Ren Unithan. I hope I said that right, Ren. She comes from the Texas Workforce Commission, where she served as the lead docket attorney in unemployment cases. She's replacing Christy Krawitz, who is moving to California at the end of next month. So it's really nice that there's some overlap there for training purposes. That's a luxury we don't often experience. Melissa has testified at an ASC hearing in Washington, D.C. She did a beautiful job. This was last week, 2 weeks ago, February 13th. She shared the great work that TALCB has done in the past couple of years and also provided feedback on the ASC grant process. She was asked questions. She handled herself beautifully, and we're really proud of her. I think our entire senior team was cheering her on virtually from afar. I also wanted to mention that our Spring Aero Conference is happening in May 3rd through 5th. That's a Friday through a Sunday. It's in Nashville. I believe that we have 3 board members who have already signed up to attend. And we also have several from staff who will be joining. Melissa, Kat, Summer Mandel will come for the first time as our communications director, and then myself. So we'll have quite a Texas contingent there this time.
And who are the 3 board members?
Let's see, who do we have? We have Chance Bolton, we have Stephanie Robinson, and we have Paola Escalante Castillo.
Fantastic. I appreciate you all attending.
Absolutely.
Nashville's going to be fun.
Nashville's going to be fun.
Maybe we should all go.
The Appraisal Institute Piraeus program is happening, and we have 39 participants from Texas as of last month. That's the most of any other state. We're going to enjoy that statistic for now, but California laws have just approved Piraeus, and so my guess is that 39 will be beat by California sometime soon. But Texas is doing very well in that regard. Got a few general updates that are not specific to the board, but just operational that I want to make sure you're aware of. We have a new HR director. He is not here today, but I just wanted you to know his name in case you see it across your email. Darren Gertz. He is not new to our agency, but he is new in the role as HR director. I have full confidence in him in this role, and he's a great addition to our senior team. We also continue our work on the ramp project with our vendor Acela. Each division is in the thick of development on this project, working with the vendor on a near daily basis. The project is on budget, but it is a little bit behind schedule, which is not at all uncommon for this type of work. Our number one priority is to get it done right, and to do it well. I'm not going to say a date anymore because I'm a little bit worried that I will continue to be wrong. Our original date was fall, and I hope not to be far off of that at all. In one more piece of news, I wanted you all to know that we are considering a move to a new building, though not for several years. There is a current hole in the ground. You probably passed. The construction that is all around us is affected. There's a block at 15th and Lavaca that state office building is being built, an 8-story office building. If we did move, it would be around the fiscal year change between 2027 and 28, so like fall of 27. This would not have a negative budgetary impact, and it would be a space that reflects our current hybrid work environment, so I think it would create a nice opportunity for us. The Texas Facilities Commission came to us and asked us to consider this move. So I want you to know that. We are working with them on what that space would look like. And then once we have that finalized, then they will send us a letter that then the commission and the board can consider, basically for that move. Because we are SDSI, I was worried that we would need to cover all of those expenses, and could we cover that? And as it turns out, this is the second phase of the capital complex construction project. And in the first phase, each agency was required to cover their own moving expenses, which proved difficult during the appropriations process. They have learned from that process, and in phase 2, all of that funding will go to the Texas Facilities Commission, and they will fund moving expenses, furniture, in a consistent way. So that is very helpful for us, and it makes the decision simpler, really. Additionally, the cost per square foot should be less expensive than what we currently enjoy, which is interesting. But we said yes to that. We thought that sounded really good. We're not questioning that decision. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
I know that we had spoken when we talked about this in executive, at the executive committee level. You were going to see if they had or were planning on having meeting space somewhat like this.
Yes, and that question remains outstanding. When I asked the question, we recently had a meeting with the architect just to talk about what it could look like to have true hybrid workspace, which the state has not done before, and we're kind of pushing forward on. They let me know that the Barbara Jordan building, which is one of the new buildings in the first phase, is what they consider kind of conference room space. They have several meeting spaces there that many boards and commissions utilize. So at the very worst, we will be able to use that space. The question, but there are meeting spaces in each state office building. And so the question is, could that space accommodate a 9-member board? My hope is that the answer to that is yes. And better than this, the wall would be large enough for 9 across one wall.
Right.
That's my push.
And so if the meeting space is in a different building within walking distance, how does that pose a challenge for, I know as we're sitting here through our meetings, we see staff sort of coming and going, and I'm assuming they're going up to their offices and coming, for different parts of the meeting, snacks. So does that pose a challenge? Does that mean that all of staff has to be on premises?
Kind of come and camp of sorts. I think it would be an adjustment, and it's not my preference, but I also know that it's something that agencies do quite often. So I think we have layers of questions to ask on just how that works and what meeting space we do have available in our own building, how far would it be, what if it's raining, just, some of those things. But I think it would be, I still think it would be a net benefit. This space is aging. I think this building will undergo renovations, so this would be a challenge, which would be a challenging time to be in this building. But as soon as I have the answer to that question, which is really my number one question, I'll let you know, because I think that really affects the way that we operate on days like today.
That would be great if the board could get that information. I think that's a very important question as we move forward as a board to make sure we have a comparable space. And also, I agree that having the staff here is incredible, and I don't want any deterrent, to where they wouldn't attend at that level that they attend.
Absolutely. No, they would attend, and I think we would need to have, the opportunity for an executive session close by. Where could we have lunch if the meeting were long enough to require that? Those sorts of things, which many other agencies have had to navigate too. So that would just be a process of.
Do we have, you mentioned 2027 for the potential move day. Do we have a timeline of benchmarks between now and then on what's occurring between now and 2027? Like, for example, I know you're working with the architects right now, but do we have a schedule in between of what that looks like?
Like a construction schedule?
As it affects our agency, yeah.
I do not have that.
Okay.
But I have talked about, I have been in close touch with the Facilities Commission about what this would look like. Would we have the opportunity to pick furniture and just kind of what those layers would be like? And there is a website that tells you kind of where I can send it to you.
Oh, okay, great.
That follows the construction process generally. There's even some webcams available. But also, I think it would just be a matter of kind of taking the lead from the Facilities Commission in terms of what comes next.
Okay.
But it would be fairly hands-off. We so far have talked about what our needs are and what type of space we would need, how many cubicles would we need, how many offices would we need, what would need to be adjacent to what, and how many conference rooms, what copy room, that sort of thing. So we're diving into those details.
And then will they confirm that all of those, because you've shared that with them, so at any point will they confirm that, yes, we've accepted all of your recommendations and this is how it's going to look type thing?
Yes. So
okay, great.
What that is by going through this exercise, they land on a square footage amount that we need, and then they assign us space based on our square footage need, and then they will send us an assignment letter that says you will be on the 4th floor of 1501 Lavaca, or whatever it is, and then the commission and the board will have an opportunity. We need to figure out how that dynamic between you works to accept that assignment.
Okay, that's what I was wondering is at what point does the board get to see that, yes, they've taken your recommendations, they've approved all of them, and then what does that really look like for us? So, okay, that makes great sense. Thank you.
So would it be a full floor? We don't have a full floor here, correct, between the two agencies?
We do not. And we do not know yet. I believe that each floor in this new space has, and it's 2 towers with an elevator bank and kind of common space in between. I believe that the square footage on each tower, each floor in each tower, if I've said that correctly, is about 24,000 square feet. So we currently utilize 19,000 square feet.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow.
So we're close.
Yeah.
And we're asking for some different type of space so that we can share office space, but have opportunities to gather for division meetings and things like that. That's a little larger than what we currently have. So what I don't know is where our square footage need will land.
I'm curious, is this, or at least the initial thoughts, is this based on a hybrid type work environment, or so it would continue as what you're doing currently?
We would likely make a few adjustments based on a few other variables, and I can mention those. Right now we have a hybrid work environment for all divisions, meaning that each division, each staff, for the most part, there's a few exceptions, come in a number of days a week and then work remotely a number of days a week. And some of that is because of our need to be in our physical space. We currently process checks, which means that we need to physically process those checks. That we are working to eliminate check processing as we move to a new database, so that we will take credit cards only. So that will become totally electronic. So that will be one less reason to be in physical space. We also have our call center that's sometimes remote, but also with a physical presence, and that's because we receive visitors to this space. We would like to move to appointment system. So if someone wants to come in, they make an appointment to come in and meet with someone specifically, and not have walk-ins. The walk-in system is not, we're a statewide agency, and so we have, someone from Amarillo cannot walk in, so we need to make sure that we have a system that accommodates people at all corners of the state. So we're working on a few variables like that, so that if necessary or if appropriate, we may take some divisions to be more remote than they currently are, to make sure that we have a robust workforce available to us, that we're not just competing with Austin, but that we could broaden our employment opportunities. But nothing is set in stone on that. We're just kind of picking at those variables to make sure that we have the flexibility we need. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
And so you said that it was less per square foot?
Yes.
That's the anticipation. And is that because of the age of this building and the operating expenses?
That is just based on the TFC rate setting decisions.
Okay.
And I think that is primarily to make sure that they have buildings that are full, that they're recouping some of their costs, but it's not a market rate scenario. I do not know what goes into it, but I can tell you with great certainty that it is not Austin market rates.
Okay, very good. And I assume that, on the commission, you have plenty of commercial brokers that can assist in making sure that, I know there's not a ton of flexibility probably with the Texas Facilities Commission, but at least someone to kind of look over all that, somebody that's in this space.
Yes, so this process is very different than the typical commercial broker scenario. Mm-hmm. We will receive a lease document to review closer to the end of 2027 to look over. It will likely look very similar to our current lease. It will look very different than if we were renting space in a strip center or in an office building elsewhere. But yes, we have great resources available to us, both through our general counsels and then also, of course, in just our brokers on the commission.
Yeah, because my concern was if we get into the building at a low rate, that we continue to have the opportunity to, that they don't raise it on us, after 5 years or something. We just want to make sure that we are committing for the long haul.
Yes, absolutely. We'll keep that in mind.
When does the lease here expire?
We would, I have known this information, and I think I've slept too many times since then, but I think our lease may go until 2028, but we would simply terminate that early in order to start a new one, depending on the ultimate timeline of construction.
Because the current lease is also with the Texas Facilities. Okay.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
It's pretty simple that way.
When you talked about walk-ins, it sort of gave me an idea. What is the reason that we have walk-ins? Why would someone choose to
come in? That's such a good question. It's typically, and Robert can speak to this in great specificity, but it's one-off scenarios. It's someone who does not want to put documents in the mail or is is already late and wants to just hop in the car and race documents to us. It's someone who doesn't maybe trust the mail system. You get a lot of people from within a couple hours away who are sometimes a little bit frantic, just wanting to get it to us. So we will have someone here to receive those things and hand them to licensing. Sometimes we get a few questions from people who just want to talk to someone face to face, but it's less than 40 a month. It's a very limited number.
Chelsea, I'll tell you, back in the old days, I used to come in when I had questions or was renewing because it was the old days, and you trying to talk to somebody was near impossible. And that's not the case now, and so it makes a lot of sense what you're saying.
Now that, the phones are being answered faster, so you can pick up the phone and talk to someone. We will forward that to licensing if we can't answer the question. We have more flexibility there, so that's a great point. But there's just some remnants of people wanting to come into the office. I still also get calls from, this is on the commission side, but local boards who are in the area who want to come take a tour of our building. It's like, there is nothing to see, but I would love to talk to you. Let's just chat, but these are our files.
If there are people, I could understand a scenario where somebody would say, this isn't an easy conversation over email, maybe would even be difficult over the phone. So maybe at some point we would offer a virtual appointment that you could go face to face. If somebody wants to say, I want you to look at, this document, and they need that sort of visual with it, I think that actually would be a great.
That's exactly what it would be.
Okay.
You can make an appointment, it could be in person or online,
Yeah.
which serves Texas better than saying, come to Austin.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that interaction also would be helpful to the staff that answers the phone. You learn so much, with that sort of interaction as opposed to just faceless kind of interaction. Anything else for the executive director?
Thanks, Shel.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'm sorry. Sorry about that. No, I was just looking at the highlight on the staff reports. And on the Education and Examination Division, first-time pass rate, certified general applicants dropped from 44% last year this time to 23%. Can we talk a little bit about that and what could be driving that?
We'll be talking about that in the education section. or-
Okay, sure. No problem.
I had the same.
Yeah, no
That's
problem.
why
Okay. Gotcha.
Okay.
We can wait into that section.
I think we're ready for it.
Jennifer's here. No, she's happy to.
Okay,
Yep.
great.
She's always ready.
Well, no, I thought I would just step up because I don't actually have a report for you today. So if you have questions about
Yes.
this. One, Ms. Robinson, we can certainly take this back to the Education and Licensing Committee to take a quick look at again. But also, I just want to remind everybody that, when we did this really big deep dive into the exam pass rate data, one of the things that we discovered was with the volume of applicants and test takers that we have, any shift in that volume can dramatically change the percentage of the first-time pass rate. So even though you see that it's dropped, the number of applicants rose. And so that has an impact. And so when we look at the coming months' exam pass rates, a little bit of a shift in the volume, because the volume isn't that high, can have a significant reverse shift to the percentage of the pass rate. So that was my takeaway from the exam pass rate results for this last month. And, with that, I just plan to keep a close eye on what it is this coming month. And then if we start to notice trends, then maybe it's something we can circle back to, again, to the Education and Licensing Committee. But I don't think, in my opinion, I wouldn't take something really dramatic away from just this 1 month
Gotcha. This is
result.
just an outlier.
I feel that is probably the case.
Yeah, that was
because
sort of-
last month it was the opposite.
And so this is fiscal year to date, so that's only 4 months, and it's over the holidays.
That's
right.
right.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So when I saw that drop from 81 to 56, I sort of, and then I went, yeah, that, when the data set is so small,
Exactly.
minor things.
And
can
I think
impact.
given a little more time, we'll probably see that level out. And if not, we'll take a look again.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, you're welcome.
Madam Chair, if I may, I can't speak to the residential, but on the certified general, that's where my trainees are, and the exam is rather rigorous, and I had several of them that didn't pass it on the first go-around, but once they've gone through the exam, then they know the nature of how the test is being presented and the questions, and they come through and are successful and pass. But nowadays, when a trainee does not pass on the first go-around, I've learned now that that's not a huge warning flag at first. It's the
Right.
multiple repeats that then you start questioning what's going on here.
Right, and distinguishing between the first-time pass rate and the overall pass rate, I think speaks to what you're saying as well. Some people, just need to go for it once and then, kind of get a feel for what the expectation is and then are successful the second time around.
Yeah, Mark, same with you. I've two colleagues that had taken the certified general test and had the same kind of deal where, I wasn't expecting it to be that long. I wasn't expecting it to be that rigorous and that kind of thing. And you can only give them so much advice. You just have to be there. You just have to. Yeah, I said, I told you how it was going to be. And they're like, oh, no, that's okay. No, it was that long. But once they got into it, they passed it the second time. So I understand where you're coming from and kind of get it. It's the multiple exam taking and failures that
We're
are.
fairly confident, and we feel good about our providers, that they have everything they need, and we're happy with that.
Yes, and in fact, all of the, pre-licensing courses are also approved by the AQB.
Okay,
So they have that federal level of oversight as well as ours.
well, that's good. That's good to know.
Yes.
Education and testing has been on our horizon for quite a while. I mean, it's not where I'd like to see it, but something to pay attention to.
But
Thank
it
you.
is, yes, nationally on par with every other state. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you tell me how many Parea providers we currently have? Are we still just at one?
We don't approve the Parea program.
Oh, okay.
All of that function takes place through licensing.
That's right. Okay.
Yes.
To our knowledge, there is only one provider still?
To my knowledge, yes.
Okay. And I will say, for those of you that don't know, McKissick, who is also a huge education provider for us, has now dropped out of the Parea space. Correct?
That's news to me.
Okay.
I can look into it.
Yeah,
but-
and I've heard that from several sources, so I would
Interesting.
think that's, yeah. My
Okay.
understanding was the price point in the market just wasn't going to support them doing that. So that's, unfortunate, when we consider there's only a handful to begin with.
Sure.
And does anyone know, the Institute is still in the beta testing of, is that what they're called? They're fully open to everyone, and we're at 39. Oh, that's interesting. I thought the numbers would be much higher once we got out of that portion of it. Okay, interesting.
Don't you think, though, that Parea has got, you don't ever hear about it. In the public who would become an appraiser, where are they hearing about it?
Right.
Nobody's hearing about it. The marketing
few
needs
questions.
to, and maybe we can do a part of that and just say, hey, this is a opportunity to become licensed. That's not the traditional model. Here you go.
Is that something when I imagine we get cold calls from people wanting to get into the appraiser profession? I imagine that's part of what we tell them. Yeah. Ms. Robinson?
Has that been communicated from a marketing standpoint, a communication standpoint?
Being an experiential component, I would probably have to turn this part of the conversation over to Melissa or Summer.
Yeah, I think it's been in our newsletters. I think at some point we,
Right.
yeah, sort of.
Okay, so it's.
Certainly on that level.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we have done, we did the trainee outreach. Do we have sort of a schedule? Because I know we felt like that was fairly successful. So is that something that we, would do every 6 months or, I mean, I guess, do we need to reach out to the same people over and over? But yeah, I don't know. Thoughts on that?
I think we kind of decided based on the content we have, we would then, if it's like a good amount and information that's useful, we would send it out, but they're always included in the general bulletin, so
Right.
they're still getting info.
Okay.
What about the people that are potentially, that could join the industry? So university students and those types of things, do we have an outreach plan to be able to share that information to those?
That's never really been, I don't think, under what we consider to be our purview.
Okay.
But, we've always sort of talked about that. Is the health of the profession part of what we do? Is that, does that go along the lines of making sure that it's...
Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me. I think we should keep in mind that these Perea programs are commercial.
Yeah.
They are
Private, right.
owned by an entity, and they're in it to make money. It's their job to do the marketing at the locations where they think they would reach. I think our job is just to say they're available. If you start to get into where you put certain people's information for them, it looks like you're supporting one program over possibly another program that comes along. So I just wanted to make that warning.
That's a great point.
And there's the balance.
Hence the balance. Just keeping in mind with the state of our demographics in terms of our appraisers, as an agency, if we could just still keep in mind that we want new folks coming into the industry. And I know we don't recruit, so to speak, but it is a benefit to the consumers to make sure that we have representation in each of those areas. So I don't know how we balance that from a recruiting standpoint, because I know that's not our hat that we wear here, or at the agency, that's just not in our wheelhouse. But at the same time, for consumer protection, it is important to make sure we're somehow looking at those demographic numbers and making sure that that there's a good mix.
Yeah,
and that's an age group, that's in female versus male, that's in all of the demographic sectors, to make sure we're looking at that.
I think that's a good point when we talk about, is it our job to recruit people into the profession? If in areas, especially in Texas, where they're underserved, if there's only one appraiser and they're not the best appraiser, then does then that become sort of in our purview of making sure that there's more to serve each
From the
geographic
consumer protection
location.
perspective, yeah.
Especially because Texas has so many, dry pockets, counties that don't have no appraisers,
So I don't know what our role really would be as an agency, but I do know one of the roles is to protect the consumers, right? And so I feel like that's a piece that is protecting the consumers. It's just how do we govern that? How do we manage that? What's our role in that,
Chair?
So just something to think about.
Sorry, I have another comment. First of all, appraisers also worry about their profession and their business. If you start saying that there aren't enough appraisers in a particular area, I think that's way out of line. I think that if an appraiser sees a need out there, that's their job to go fill that need, make arrangements, increase their staff or whatever they use. I think it's such a fine line of imposing on someone's profession and their business that we just need to tread very carefully.
I absolutely agree with that. And where does it, when you're talking about people in underserved areas that can't get a mortgage, is that, that's something as a society, as agencies, both federal and state, that we try to encourage that people can do commerce. And if we're not if we're not facilitating that or assisting that in some way, is that our role? And I think it's something.
I don't think it's the board's role. I
Yeah.
think it's the appraiser's role.
And so and just to clarify, by no means do I mean we need to have the individual company owners reach out to those areas. By no means, because as a private business owner, that's your vision of your company. What I'm talking about is introducing new appraisers to the industry to fill the gaps that we currently see, whether that's in rural areas, whether there's in a certain demographic group. I'm looking at just the age group of having new people join the industry. So I wouldn't put any type of emphasis at all on business owners to do anything. That is their prerogative to how they run their business. I'm more referring to new people coming in to represent the community of the state of Texas.
Well, we have appraisers on the board. They're serving trainees. They're the ones that really have an obligation to their own profession to make people aware of where there's opportunity for them. You know, I live in El Paso. We have a very tiny little area. You go outside of that and it's a foreign country to us. Plus we're in a different time zone. So I can't really wrap my head around the distances between some of these small towns and how far people have to travel. But that is part of the profession, that they understand they have to do that. They'll take a job in another state, they'll whatever. So I think that the job of working with the trainees, telling them where opportunity exists, encouraging them if they have a friend or someone else to get involved in the profession, that to me lies on the profession itself and the people in it. That's just my opinion.
I think that's great perspective.
Thank you.
Jennifer, how do we, one quick question, you don't have to come back. How do we know how many Pareja participants there are in Texas? The AQB reports that to us?
I would defer that to Melissa.
Oh, okay, thank you. Good morning, Director Tran.
Good morning again. Yeah, the only way we would know is to reach out to Appraisal Institute. So I've been in close communication with them, and they give us regular updates of the number of participants.
Okay. Yeah, that number, when you consider that we have 1,200 trainees, that number seems a lot lower than what I think we all thought it was going to be once the program became available. And of course, those 39 are not in that number of 1,200 because they're not in our system until they are done.
I think part of it is also remembering that this program just came out in September, and you have to do your qualifying education before you can get in. Right. So some of it just might be the lag to get in.
Yeah. Okay.
And then also the supervisory appraisers know this, that they know the regular system, they know that, not Pareja.
Right.
So,
right.
I mean, a lot of them already have supervisors, so it's still, I think there's, as you said, a lag. So there's going to be that, but knowing that we're the most of any state is not bad. So we'll see. We'll see.
Considering, I think it took, 10 years to get Pareja passed at the federal level? Sort of like, was it all for naught? Very good. I did want to kind of ask you about your testimony a few weeks ago, and I am remiss that I didn't watch it at the time. Can you tell us a little bit about how it went? What were the questions that they had for you?
I think it went well, so we're waiting for the recording to be released. We'll send it to you when we have it. It was good. A lot of the focus, so they just, the theme of this hearing, they had a series of hearings. This is the fourth, and I think final, was how to move forward. They wanted to hear a lot from us about our partnership with the Texas Workforce Commission and handling appraisal bias from an enforcement perspective, but they're really interested in hearing that we've had so many prior participants, and like, how did we get there? A lot of it is the communications that Sierra and Summer have done. So we talked about that, and then we also shared how we work so hard to reduce barriers to entry. So in Texas, when you come here, it's going to be easier than any other state. But still with that, we get questions every day from trainees saying it's still really hard. So what could they do at their level? My recommendations were, number one, it might be time to relook at the qualifications criteria, because no matter what we do here, we still have to apply the federal minimum. And then from there, also just giving states more flexibility and support through grants. They released their notice of funding, and we're still trying to work through that. I think that some of the limitations were a little bit surprising to us. Not anything that we couldn't work through, but just those were the two big things that I gave to them as far as feedback from the state level.
I am so proud of the work that you and the agency have done, and the public positioning that the state of Texas is now in. We're at the forefront. And I get the sense when I go to the conferences and I see how everyone's referencing Texas and all the sessions. Well, I heard Texas is doing such and such. So I just want to thank you for your leadership, thank the entire team. It feels so good to leave outside of Texas and still hear how great Texas is doing. So thank you for that. Thanks for stepping out and representing our state very well.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it was an honor that they even asked.
I know, right?
Yeah, we would participate. Yeah, I think that says a lot.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Does anybody, while Director Tran is up here, does anybody have any questions on any enforcement items from the staff report? I did notice that at our November meeting, we had 10 cases at TWC, and now we have 5. So that's great, and I think maybe at the enforcement committee level, we can talk about what happened with those 5 cases, just to make sure that we are still monitoring that program. We do have a lot more cases abated than we did at our February last year meeting. I think 6. Last year we had 6 that were over a year, and now we have 11 that are over a year. Can you talk a little bit about why that might be?
The majority of those are abated because of outside civil litigation. We just happen to have multiple complaints that are involved in the same civil litigation, so it makes the number look like it's a lot higher. But the same civil litigation could be like abating 4 of our complaints.
I see.
And then also abatement through the TWC, so adding that layer onto it as well.
Yeah, okay. Are the TWC cases taking longer than a year typically?
Just the ones that have to go to HUD.
Oh.
So if there's a protected class that is not recognized in Texas, but it's recognized federally, same-sex
I see.
protected class, it'll go to HUD, and HUD is taking longer than TWC.
Melissa, what is it? So 2 of them I saw were resolved by conciliation. Can you maybe explain what that is?
A conciliation agreement is similar but not exactly the same as an agreed final order for us. So if TWC's role is a little bit different from us, they want to ensure that the consumer feels whole at the end of it. And so a lot of times, what they will do in every investigation is pick up the phone and say, what would it take to make you feel whole? A lot of times it's like a refund of the fee or a new appraisal, some sort of like a fair housing education. And so the TWC investigator will take that and go to the respondent and just say, is this something that you're willing to do? And if so, then that's how the conciliation comes about.
So when a conciliation occurs, what do we do?
It depends. We haven't had, it depends. If there's evidence and there's something that we need to move forward on, we will. But if we feel like the fair housing education has handled it, or we don't need to do anything further, then we won't. There's been 2 conciliations. One we've resolved through contingent dismissal for USPAP mentorship, and the other dismissed with warning.
Thank you.
So if the appraiser agrees to refund the money, because that seems like the easiest thing within the TWC case, that doesn't necessarily, do they know that does or doesn't impact the way that we then pick up the case?
They know that TWC's findings is not binding on us in any way.
Okay. Yeah, because I think if I was a respondent, I would feel like any kind of admission in the TWC process might lead to
Action.
action by our agency.
Well, is that something that you could, say a respondent, that they make a resolution or agree to a resolution and conciliation with TWC if it's not further investigated by TALCB? Is that a possibility? Is that something?
I think that's possible. I think I would want to discuss it more in an enforcement committee meeting. There might be some repercussions that we would want to think through before we did something like that. But I think it's possible.
I don't want to commit.
Looks strange.
So can we talk about that at the next
Yes,
enforcement committee?
yes, of course.
Yeah, because I recall one of the earliest cases was like they agreed to, I think, refund the appraisal and then develop an inter-office policy about discrimination and bias. And, I think that's a great resolution if that satisfies the other party. But I don't want that. I want someone to be agreeable to do those sorts of things without having to feel like they're going to be in trouble with us because they agreed to something.
Kind of in the same way our agreed orders has that language that says by signing this, you're not admitting to any fault. The conciliations have the same sort of disclaimers. Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Any other questions about enforcement? I do have some questions about the budget, if Ms. Williams would be so kind. Thank you, Director Tran. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm looking at our budget on page 60. And the comments, I'm wondering about the comments. So is that what we were expecting to happen and that's what we made our budget on, or is that what actually happened?
Let me get there, sorry. Okay, so that is what actually happened. So those comments are based on the activity, and that's what actually happened. We had 302 applications, the 966 renewals during that period.
Okay. And so I noticed that our AMCs, we finally got above 180 for the first time in several years, and we had 182 at the end of last fiscal year, and now we're back down to 176. But we did have 3 new AMCs, so I'm kind of wondering, that's where our biggest lag is in revenue remaining to be collected. Of course, AMCs, there's a ton that renew, I think, in like June or July, and so that might be part of it. But are we worried about any of these numbers?
Right now, I am not worried. I want to just kind of wait and see where we are at the end of February, give me 6 months of data so I can kind of look at those trends and see. Right. But like you stated, the majority of people, they do renew during that June, July, the summer months. And so we'll see the influx of that money, like from March through August is where we'll see the majority of that increase.
And I'm kind of wondering if that drop is sort of our natural January drop when the AMCs, and Melissa, you might know this better, do you think that it has to do with them having to pay the federal fees in January, and so maybe that's why AMCs, okay. I was hoping that wasn't sort of a trend, just that one time a year kind of thing. And so at the bottom of the budget, it says slightly below our target of 33%. 33% is just, it's 4 months of the year, right?
Yes,
like, yeah, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, we would generally expect the holiday months to be slower. People, probably didn't get their license originally at that time, don't renew at that time. Yeah.
Absolutely, and that's what the trend shows year over year. We are typically slower in our revenue collection at the fall and winter months, and then spring and summer is where we see an increase in revenue collection.
So we do expect for that 24.8% number to offset based on the seasonal changes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And looking at the trend just for last month, we're at 35%, so it's already increasing. It's
Okay.
It's just that fall, winter low.
And then, can you talk a little bit about the expenditures? It looks like we're a little over where we budgeted we would be at this time. It's, let's see, it looks like
on the next
we've
page.
spent 29,
We're still slightly below our target for our expenditures as well.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, we should be.
Okay, I see.
We should have been
I'm
at
sorry, I missed-
33.3 and we were at 29.5%.
very good, my apologies, I misread that. Okay.
So at the next budget committee meeting, just, I'm very sensitive about the state of the market and how that might impact us. So at the next committee meeting, let's see, we will have then January and February. So we will have 6 months of data by then. So if you'll just, make sure that we take a look at that, and if we need to make any adjustments, that we, try and be as nimble as possible. Just again, with the market where it's at, I don't want us to get too far off track.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
And one other thing about the AMCs, just have, we've passed the late fee. We expect that to be an additional source of revenue, correct? How big do we expect that to be? Negligible
I
or
think it's probably
significant?
negligible. Isn't it like $500 or something
Yes.
like that? Yeah, and there's probably, a handful, I would imagine that's negligible.
Okay.
And where are we on the AMCs? Again, I'm sorry, I keep sort of jumping around to different staff members. So what we'll need at the next one is we'll need a dice for all of the staff members to just sit there.
This will go up and down, up and down.
Yeah. Like a congressional.
Your question was where we're at on the register reporting?
Yes, that's what my question is. Thank you for reminding me.
So as of yesterday, we're at 39% of AMC's reporting. We still have a little over a month to go, so I think they're going to come in at the last minute. We've collected $213,000 that will be passed on to the ASC so far.
Okay.
So we'll see if that late fee means anything to anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not, we didn't have too many, it was like about 10 or so last year that paid
Okay.
late, so.
Yeah, okay. Fantastic. Okay, anything else from staff reports that anyone has a question on?
I have one more finance question, if you would, I'm just kidding. I was just doing the swap, just kidding, sorry.
You're mean, Stephanie.
I know, I haven't been around in a while, I've got to shake it up some.
She missed last meeting, so she's making up for it. And I did want to say to the enforcement division that those numbers continue to look good. So we certainly appreciate that y'all have kept on top of those. Good morning, Ms. Santos.
Good morning.
You are here for agenda item number 11.
If you're ready for me, unless
We are.
you've got any more.
This is discussion and possible action to adopt new 22 TAC Chapter 151, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. These start on page 68 in our materials.
Good morning, Madam Chair, board members, Kathleen Santos, your general counsel. And before, as you mentioned, we have some rules up for adoption. In this first agenda item 11, the new rules before you would comprise a new general administration chapter. These rules are a little bit different from what you're accustomed to seeing because, they relate to the administration of the agency and not to appraisers or AMCs. All the rules before you are modeled after existing TREC rules, or we're adopting by reference other existing rules, and that's for one, consistency, and two, much of these requirements are driven by statute. In any event, we didn't receive any comments, so staff's recommendations are to adopt the rules as presented, and I'm happy to address any questions you might have.
If there are no questions, I will hear a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that we adopt the changes as presented.
I will second that.
We have a motion by Mr. McAnally and a second by Ms. Robinson. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 12.
Agenda item 12, discussion and possible action to adopt amendments to 22, Chapter 153, specifically sections 153.12 criminal history checks and 153.16 license reinstatement. These amendments before you for 153.12, the criminal history checks, more accurately reflect the process for the criminal history checks. We're just removing some surplus language that isn't applicable. And in section 153.16, we are refining the requirements for restating a license. The amendments remove the re-examination requirement and clarify the requirements are consistent with those of the AQB, and then specify when an applicant must demonstrate experience in compliance with USPAP. We did not receive any comments, and staff's recommendations is to adopt the amendments as presented, and I'm happy to address any questions you might have.
Hearing no questions, I will hear a motion.
Madam Chair, on behalf of this board, to submit the adoption of these amendments published along with any technical or minor changes as required for adoption.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Reed Lynch and a second by Mr. McAnally. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Agenda item number 13 is on page 75 in your materials. Ms. Santos.
Discussion and possible action to adopt amendments to 22 TAC Section 159.110 AMC National Registry. The amendments before you here allow for greater flexibility in addressing instances where an AMC has failed to pay the National Registry fee. In addition to paying a late fee or disciplinary action, that process already exists, an AMC that has failed to pay could be placed on inactive status. We did receive one comment in response to this notice. However, the comment did not pertain to the language being amended. Therefore, no changes to the language is recommended. And staff's recommendation is to adopt the amendments as presented.
Any questions for Ms. Santos? If not, I'll hear a motion.
Madam Chair, move that the staff is authorized on behalf of this board to submit for adoption the amendments as presented, along with any technical or minor changes as required for adoption.
I second.
We have a motion by Ms. Reed Lynch and a second by Mr. Bolton. Any further questions, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. As a reminder, we have moved agenda item number 15, executive session, 14, to after agenda item number 15, new business, to accommodate anyone that might be here for public comment. So we sent out a communication, I think it was last week, inviting the public to comment on this topic. Given the sort of late notice, I'm not surprised that we haven't received any requests for public comment. Have we received any written comments that, so to introduce this topic, a couple of years ago, we had a complaint that was filed, and through our sort of investigating it, we had a lot of conversations about it. It was very specialized. There's not a lot of, it's not like bank work or mortgage work where there's just a ton of appraisers doing this specific type of appraisal work. And so it sort of got, in trying to answer the specific question, we also talked about sort of answering the broader question of USPAP and how we look at these through enforcement. And I wanted to say that I know that there are a lot of people who have opinions on this topic, and because of the late notice, and if they weren't able to comment today, either being here in person or submitting comments, that I would ask that Mr. Bolton continue this conversation at the next enforcement committee meeting, which will allow people across the state to participate remotely. And allow additional time for additional comments. And after we introduce the topic today, maybe, there might be better understanding of what it is that we're looking for. So, of course, USPAP says that we have, that the scope of work is acceptable if it meets two criteria. And one is that it is expected by typical and regular intended users. So, mortgage companies, banks, whoever, the IRS, the attorneys, that sort of thing. And the second one, and it's not an or, but it's an and. So, and it is what your peers would do in the same assignment. And so the sort of the question that came to us, this complaint was about a low-income housing tax credit property. So this is multifamily affordable housing. And the appraiser was taking the debt service out of the NOI before capitalizing that NOI. That is not something that is normal practice in appraisal practice. So we sort of were tasked with, is this an appropriate methodology? How do we determine that? How do we find appraiser peers? Is it upon the respondent to say, here are the examples? What constitutes a peer? Is a rural appraiser a peer to an urban appraiser? Is the partner in the next office over that's doing the same thing a peer, and does that count as your peer? Is a reviewer a peer to a fee appraiser? So I think we sort of want to talk about this in a sort of large philosophical way, but we also wanted to get specific input on the debt service in NOI for the low-income housing question as well. And so I know that we have received 2 public comments. I've only seen one of them, but it was, I specifically reached out to appraisers that I knew were in this space, talked to some of the bigger firms and said, I know you probably have an affordable housing person on staff, and if they would be willing to weigh in, we would like the answer to this question so that we can offer, some guidance to our license holders that we as an agency have determined that this is, either appropriate or inappropriate. And again, to go through sort of the process to figure out when we're faced with another specialized assignment, how to investigate it.
Madam Chair, I'm first of all happy to take that up on the Enforcement Committee, and to the larger question, I just want everybody to think about this, be aware that certainly understand that things need to be, you need to be doing the same things as your peers. That's what's happening in the market. But we also want to not stifle innovation. Somebody might figure out a way to do it better, to be more accurate. And so I just would like that context in the discussion.
I very much appreciate that. But if you're innovating and you're doing something that no one else is doing, then does that meet the USPAP standard?
I think that's a good question. I mean, and I also think it's one of judgment. If I'm doing, say, an income approach in a different way that I believe is more accurate, I'm still doing an income approach. That's an acceptable methodology, but the process may vary and may be more accurate, maybe not.
As a former reviewer, anybody doing anything different than what I've seen, explanation, discussion, making sure that you talk to your client and or reviewer, whoever you have, making sure that they know what's coming before they're bombarded with something new. Because if I'm approaching it and I see something different, it's just, that throws me for a loop, and then that's where the questions are going to come up anyway. So making sure that hopefully your client relationship is good enough to where you talk to the client front end, say, hey, this is how I'm approaching this, just be aware, and then making sure you add discussion and as verbose explanation as you can in order to substantiate your conclusions, because it's not something that's obviously normal. So
no, I fully agree with you. Yeah. In my line of work, which is mostly eminent domain valuation, the appraisers can vary widely on what their techniques they use, what approaches they use. For instance, say in pipeline works, in some cases an appraiser may use the sale of easements to value that property. Okay. Another appraiser may say, no, it's a part of a ranch, a pro rata share, and that's that. So I think there's a lot of opinion that goes into this, but I do agree that if you are doing something that you feel is innovative, you definitely need to talk to your client, and you definitely should explain it so that it's clear to the reader.
I totally agree with the explanation over and over through every section of the report, and to discuss it with your client. One other thing, though, always points to me is when I'm reviewing that or I'm looking at all the approaches, again, we talk about, like Lisa Sprinkle said, balance. The three approaches should balance each other. If one using that income approach that is using something new or unique to most appraisers, it should be reflected in the other two approaches that we're off of kilter. And so that's something we need to look at and say, well, maybe this is not the right way to approach it. So, there are market influences and market practices that point to us and say something's off here, and that could support one or the other.
And one other thing, I saw this in its original form when this happened, this question. And I just think, and of course, like everyone's saying, balance, peers, what are they doing? And I'm not saying that I'm a peer or that I have the balance, but what confused or concerned me is that the technique used, it was like the individual has one foot in real estate valuation and the other foot in accounting. And if you're in accounting, an accountant may say, well, you didn't do everything you needed to do as far as that deduction to calculate an after-tax cash flow. And so therein lies the problem. And innovation is good, but now we don't need AI fabricating case law. So that's my question mark, and I would like to see the rest of the profession weigh in on this. Maybe someone has something that can correct me in my line of thinking right now.
And I'll, if I can, I have two areas of, first thing, innovation. I love that. Every industry, regardless whether it's the appraisal industry or any business industry, needs innovation in order for it to continue to grow and prosper and those types of things. So I'm with it. I appreciate you bringing that up because that is an important piece. I did have a question on the consumer side of things. What is the process if we find something that is quite innovative and that truly is a best practice that works? What's the process of introducing that to USPAP and actually getting it on the books as an official acceptable thing? Do we know?
Well, I would say that there's a lot of classes and books and teachers out there. And so, I am often pulling up, a giant book and looking for things to see if this is a methodology that has been documented in that kind of way. I would say that if you're going to innovate, that at the very least, you pick up the phone and you call some people and run it by them and see. And to me, if you can do that and say, I talked to these other three people who are also in this space and they agreed with this methodology, I think that would probably be acceptable. You talked about, Mr. Bolton, if you value it one way or another, but is there anyone out there valuing it in a completely unique way? And would that be acceptable if someone just, sort of said, I'm going to do differently than all the other eminent domain appraisers?
And is that allowed according to USPAP, or will they be in violation of?
In my mind, they would be in violation if they're doing something that no one else is doing.
Well, I think also, you can, in my example, there are others doing what I was describing.
Right.
But I also think another way to do that is, you can have peer review through, you go to a conference and present your ideas and
through publication. That's what I see is an article published in the Appraisal Institute magazine, Right Away magazine. There are lots of venues that you can become
And just so
a publisher.
I don't know, so if that were the case where it is a peer review or a publication, then is it acceptable according to USPAP?
Well, I'm out of a little bit of a different mode, and that would be that if you have innovation and you would like to have it tested, I would probably go through the academia.
Exactly.
And you've got a big school right over here, you got big schools everywhere that do research. And they completely vet this out through a scientific principle.
Would it be acceptable to USPAP to do that if you were to have a sample population that you did a research academia type project?
That would be a good start, because then you have captured the respect and attention of the people.
And the data.
Yes, and the data, exactly. Because you need data that can be tested. Exactly.
And not just throw it out there one time or two times and say, I'm doing it this way. That's not the way to go.
Stephanie,
That's not a respected way to go.
I think to answer your question, it's maybe. It may be acceptable, maybe not. I think it might, again, in my opinion, there's a lot of opinion in determining whether something is USPAP compliant or not, and it's particularly with this. And I think it also would be kind of what's the disposition of that particular authority? Are they more forward-thinking, or are they more conservative? I think that's just a fact that's going to be a part of that.
Okay, and I just need to learn more about the process, because I love how you brought up innovation, but I don't want appraisers to be so afraid to innovate because they're strapped by USPAP, right? So I just need to educate myself more on what that.
And that's a great point, because somebody was the first appraiser to apply a 0% vacancy to a net lease property, and now it's standard practice, but somebody was the first one to do
How
that.
does it become standard practice and acceptable?
Right,
You know?
right.
I mean, there's a reason why they're called the Elwood tables.
Right.
Because Elwood invented the tables.
But there are publications specific to appraising multifamily, appraising convenience stores, appraising, hotels and that sort of thing. And so I think that would be a good start. If you had a complaint filed against you and you had that sort of information, that's sort of what this discussion is about. So that's not necessarily your peers, but if you got academia and other peers aren't doing it, but you talk to them and they thought it was an appropriate methodology, does that suffice?
And have a study to back you up. I mean, you can't, I personally would not feel comfortable using that method without the study behind me,
So, and I might have the specifics of the case a little bit wrong, so, but just sort of for the conversation, my recollection is that this appraiser didn't have evidence that any other appraisers were using this methodology. That what they had was sort of their logic and reasoning, and also a court, I think 12 years ago, accepted it as methodology, so, a judge. And does that count as our peers? Does that, judges aren't appraisers, right? They don't have any formal training and education, so does that count as being an accepted methodology in the marketplace? Those are sort of the bigger questions that we wanted to tackle here.
Well, Madam Chair, as I said, we're happy to take this up and discuss all these questions in the Enforcement Committee.
Fantastic. And
discussion's good.
yeah. And
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I didn't mean to interrupt. That my second question, so that was my first statement. What is the effects of this to the consumer, or are there? I'm just curious.
Well,
just
I think at the end of the day, whatever makes an appraiser a more accurate estimator of value is better for the consumer. And so it may be that a specific methodology does that, or maybe it doesn't. And
what about this specific agenda item, though? Like, just so I understand that this specific one, is that a negative?
it was, the specific was, the appraisal was to contest the county's tax assessment.
Okay.
So that the property owner would owe less taxes.
Okay, okay.
It's financially benefiting
Okay.
To the property owner.
to the property.
to the consumer, but
Not-
not taxpayers,
Yes,
the other
to
taxpayers.
the individual.
Right, to the
Okay.
individual and
Okay.
at the detriment to taxpayers. Although that's, that's, I don't think, something that we
Can't say specifically.
consider or, right.
Thank you for tying that together for me.
Sure.
I just wanted to understand that. Thank you.
Sure. Any other discussion on this before we move on to executive session? Very good. I appreciate the I imagine you'll want to carve out a couple of hours for your next enforcement committee meeting if we have some participation. And I've spoken to several individuals who would like to participate, so
Great.
go ahead and block that off on your calendar. Okay, we will now go into executive session. The time is 10:32. And the board will now go into executive session to obtain the advice of legal counsel or discuss pending or anticipated litigation, including settlement offers and enforcement actions pursuant to Texas Government Code 551071 and personnel matters pursuant to Texas Government Code 551074. We anticipate returning to open session in approximately 25 minutes. Does that work for everyone? Let's say 20, and if we run over a little bit. Okay, so 20 minutes, so 10:53 is when we will be back. The time is now 11:07, and the board is back from executive session and reconvening in open session. We are moving on to agenda item number 16, discussion regarding performance review and salary of the TALCB executive director. Just as a reminder, the performance review process is yearly. And it consists of, they survey the 9 TREC commissioners and the 9 board members, as well as a staff survey that's sent to senior staff, including division directors, direct reports, and a random sampling of staff from each division for both TREC and TALCB, for a total of about 20 staff members. Then our executive committee meets with the commission's executive committee to talk about the results of the surveys and just get our input on what action TREC intends to take, because they hold all the authority as far as the executive director position on employment and salary. But they do ask for our input, and we're always grateful to have the opportunity to have that discussion. And then at both board meetings, at the commission's meeting and our board meeting, we discuss it in both executive session and then an open session as well. And TREC votes on changes, so we don't have any action today, but I will say that we're going to open it up for discussion for any comments from any board members. I'll just quickly kind of go over some of the results of the surveys. Both the TREC commissioner survey and the board's survey were either completely consistent or just slightly above what they were last year. So I think that that's a great sign as far as the ratings that they gave the executive director. We did talk about changing the wording for the surveys for all 18 board members, so that it's a little easier to answer the questions from the standpoint that we don't have day-to-day communication with the Director Buchholz, and so just to make that a little bit easier for us and maybe deliver staff surveys to us before we do those surveys. Of course, some board members, both on the TREC side and our side, have more interaction with the director. Commissioner is just so right there. So that obviously influences, some of the survey results and how many of us completed the survey. We asked the TREC Executive Commission to look at the salary, at the director's salary as it compares to other executive directors from other agencies, taking into account, total employee number, total license number, budget, and that sort of thing. Because I think up to this point, the executive director has had sort of yearly increases, but we want to make sure that it's on par with other similar positions and not, just bound by the same, annual increase that salary that staff has gotten, because leadership, you want to make sure that leadership is happy and stays in place. That for the continuity of the agency, that's extraordinarily important. So, the executive director got very high marks from staff again. Of the 20 staff surveys, transparent was used 4 times. The words support and trust and latitude without hovering were also mentioned several times. 8 of them mentioned words like kind and caring and compassionate and nice. Several mentioned how she handles tough conversations, which I thought was a really, important that they recognize that those conversations have to be had, and that and recognize the way that she handles them. So I think that was good. I will say the commission met earlier this month and voted on a 5% increase in salary. And now I will open the floor to any additional comments from my fellow board members.
Chelsea, I I'm speaking for myself, but I feel like the board is behind this as well. They can still feel free to make their own comments, but my opinion about a performance review is it's not an annual review, it's continuous, it's ongoing. And what I have seen is not only from surveys, but also what you've been doing and what you do in the meetings and in conversations one-on-one with us. And it really transcends to your leadership style, to your staff. Your staff is not only a recipient of your leadership style, but are a reflection of your leadership style. And I have seen your staff really grow. They've become very professional. They're more than willing to help not only just board members, but the public as well with questions, issues. And I just see I've seen a lot of growth and a lot of openness of your staff with the public and with the board at large. And I think that's a testament to your skills. Thank you very much.
Job well done.
Yeah, I think in executive session, Mr. McAnally, mentioned how staff is such a reflection, and I would just reiterate that point, that I feel like as I'm looking out on staff, each one of them has risen to the challenge of, the last 5 years, and seems like, been able to do the thing that they're good at. And, that as a leader in my own organization, that's sort of my philosophy, is like, I'm an adult, I'll do what I need to do, and I'm going to trust you to do what you need to do, and I'm going to give you the latitude and the support to do that. And I feel like that's certainly reflected in your staff members. And we want to make sure that we continue to give you the resources to continue to have a great staff and to bring on, new and incredible people. And maybe even the new building would be part of that. I could imagine that for staff to be in a more modern building that has, better amenities, would be somewhat of a draw. Maybe it's, as everyone is working remotely and doesn't want to come into the office, maybe that would be helpful to the positions that do require people to come in on any kind of, regular basis. But whatever we can do to assist you in making sure that we continue with the staff that we've got, please let us know.
I'll just say Commissioner / Executive Director, because I came on with, used to Commissioner. I'm so appreciative of everything you've done. Thinking back 5 years, we were just saying how fast time flies. But coming on, I remember when you came in for that interview and you were so confident and you were ready to go and you did so well. And then when we all, when we decided, okay, this is a good fit, we knew initially, and I think you were even very transparent, that, hey, I've got to get up to speed in terms of the industry, because I think in terms of running the agency, because that was a very new role for you. But looking at where we were then, comparing it to where we are now, with the staff, with the performance, with the outcomes, with even our reputation as an industry out in the field, our reputation as an agency to the industry out in the field, all of that has been night and day, I think, from 5 years ago. And so, again, that's a testament to your leadership. That's a testament to how you work with your team and love on them and your staff. And let's not forget COVID, right?
Yeah.
Let's not forget all the maneuvering you had to do to make sure we still function at a very high level during that really tough time. So I appreciate it. I appreciate everything you've done, all the work you've put in, everything you've done for the staff to elevate them and make them feel like, hey, we have the power to be strong and powerful too. I appreciate it. You've done an amazing job, and thank you. And I'm proud to serve on a board that has such an amazing leader for the agency. So thank you for everything.
Ditto.
Ditto, 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 all the way down.
Yeah, thank you for reminding that I failed to mention the fact that when I was originally appointed, we were to be sunsetted at the end of my term. which would have been next legislative session in 2025. And now that's not happening, and I am grateful for that. That is obviously tied directly to the leadership. I'm sure you're glad for that as well. And that means that my replacement will then have to go into that hot seat. So, so good luck to them. Anything else for the executive director before we move on to final items? Agenda item number 17 is discussion and possible action regarding agenda items for future meetings. Anything that we need to carry forward? Okay, we will move on to agenda item number 18, discussion and possible action to schedule future meeting dates. So the calendars are on the last page of your materials. Future meeting dates were previously set for May 10th and August 16th. Those of you with children in school, we're going to check with your schedules and make sure that those dates worked for you. Are those dates still acceptable for everyone? Mm-hmm. Very good. I just found out that my graduate will not be leaving the state of Texas, so I'm not as anxious about that August meeting as I previously was. So we can set a tentative date for the November board meeting and workshop. Did we decide we're having a workshop every year? Is that necessary? Is that statutorily required? General counsel?
I think that was something that, we have our policy in place that the executive committee was going to take a look at and see if, I know back in November, maybe looking towards a different time period, a longer time period between, and then as needed.
Yeah.
As far as scheduling, it's if we need to schedule it, and then we can also take it off the calendar later.
Okay.
That option is.
What about the idea of doing it like Monday virtually before the Friday board meeting so that...
or if you ever wanted to do it the same day as well, since,
Oh, I didn't think about that.
You mean all Friday?
Yeah.
The whole Friday?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, our meetings are so...
Short.
No. Efficient.
Efficient. Concise.
We'll make
Summary.
Same day would not be bad. That's not a bad idea.
Madam Chair, if you want me to lead that board or workshop, I'll be happy to make that very efficient.
Well, my concern is always if something comes up between now and then that we want to make sure that we've left room for it to, and, my thought about having it virtually on Thursday, so many people are traveling, so we don't want to do that. Because I was thinking virtually might be easier, if we just need an hour or two.
I don't think we could do virtual, or we'd have to think about that.
That's right, because we only had the exception during COVID to do virtual gatherings. Okay.
The other thing is, I wouldn't want to do it all day Friday either, because it becomes very difficult for us.
Travel.
Get it
Right.
home.
Sure. Okay.
And Friday's nice.
And I like you guys. I want to see y'all.
So should we set a tentative date for the Thursday, and if we don't need it, we don't need it?
I think that's fine. We don't start booking travel until further in time, and I think by the May meeting, maybe we'll have an answer, if something on, as far as the policy.
So maybe by the August board meeting, we would call it off if unnecessary.
Definitely easier to remove a date than to try to add one
Okay,
after the fact.
that's okay.
With availability.
So looking at November, Monday, the 11th, has Trek set any meetings for that date? For November?
Monday?
Sorry, Monday, the 11th is Veterans Day. I didn't finish my sentence. My kids are always like, Mom, what was the rest of that?
Keep going.
Yeah, that's what I was just saying. I want to make sure that was noted before we, and then of course Thanksgiving is the last week of November, so. Should we meet the day after Thanksgiving?
Oh, no.
I'm kidding.
Unless you're bringing food and cooking, hey.
What dates are we looking at?
Ooh, in that case.
We aren't looking at any dates. We're just waiting to see if Trek has any meetings that we want to work around. I don't really want to do it the right before Thanksgiving, the 21st and 22nd. My preference would be the 14th and 15th.
Same here.
Yep.
For what? 14th and 15th.
November 14th and 15th.
And 4th and 5th of November are the TREC meetings.
Okay, so the 14th and 15th for us gives plenty of, that Monday is a holiday, gives us 2 weeks between, I mean, not full, 2 full weeks. Hang on, Martha Gale's got to get her paper calendar out.
So when is the Fall Aero Conference, by the way?
Oh,
That was
October-ish.
the other one that I was wondering about, because it might be the same.
The October Aero Conference is in Boston, correct?
October 28th through 30th.
Okay.
Okay, so it's on
Yep.
last week. Okay.
So the 14th and 15th, we will put as tentative dates. The 14th is a maybe, the 15th is definite unless something comes up. Okay. Thank you to everyone for today. It went a little longer than I anticipated that it would with such a short agenda, but I'm always happy for a robust board discussion. And look forward to, I do want to note that for the Enforcement Committee meeting where we will take up this, we need to make sure that any board members that want to participate, that we don't have a quorum of the board. And so anybody who's desiring to participate should probably let Mr. Bolton know so that we can make sure that we don't exceed that amount of people. Okay, the time is 11:23. Everyone have a great weekend, safe travels home, and this meeting is adjourned.